Hello and welcome to another episode of Seventh Tier Podcast, a weekly Storybook Rule podcast focused on strategy and high-level play. My name is Jethro, and I am joined this week and every week by your friend and mine, the best games player I know on high-strength painkillers. It's Sythesys! Sith, how's it going?
Yeah, it's okay. I did in fact get a rollerblading accident, which makes me sound way cooler than I am, last week. And I've injured my elbow, and I have been on some painkillers this week, which is very much reflected in my stats. So and in my tournament performance, unfortunately. So not a strong storybook rule week for me, but fundamentally it's not that bad. I'll be fine.
I'm sure the listeners will join me in wishing you a speedy recovery. It's always good to see which of us has the worst stats for the week based on who comes in early with the excuses.
I mean, mine is my worst ever by a lot, and I have a pretty good justification for it. Yeah.
So I'm looking at, over the last 7 days of play, I've had 48 games with 14 crowns, 33 top fours, for an average finish of 3.50, 3.5 dead. Yeah. Just above a perfectly average performance, assuming no bots in my lobbies, which is what I'm going to claim.
Yeah, it's good. It's totally fine.
It's reasonable. That's got all 6 rounds from the tournament in there from last weekend.
Oh yeah, sure. Included with tournament games, that's much more impressive. Like, tournament games always drag my average down, except for that one week where I won the whole tournament or whatever. Came top 8. Any standouts for you before we go into my stats?
Standouts from the tournament. I played Snow Angel twice, and I shouldn't have. I think, I picked Snow Angel because my tournament prep was garbage, fundamentally. I didn't do what I normally do going into the tournament, which is try and play as many different heroes as possible. Like, before I made the tier list, I wanted to make sure I'd played every hero 5 times. That's always my attitude to this game. I do not know how to play unless I've tried something. I can't just theorycraft, I'll die. And so in the tournament, I was offered Mad Catter twice. And I'd played Mad Catter once on this patch. I came second, but I felt like I got lucky. I felt like I rolled into 2 doublies and they got the bonuses, went into dwarves. That's the thing to do in this match. If you missed the tournament coverage, be dwarves. That'll probably change fairly soon. So I felt like I couldn't take Catter, which meant that I was forced to take heroes that are either very linear, like Mirror or Snow Angel, but can still spike, because I wanted the comfort, I guess, of feeling like I knew what I was doing. Coming over to my stats page, the standout from the last 7 days by a long way is Sadrak. Played Sadrak 3 times, 2 crowns, average finish of 1.33. I think Sadrak into Slay is in a very strong place, but that's not surprising to anyone.
So my average placement for Sadrak this week is 8.0. So that's that's a stark contrast. So yeah, my stats this week, since pivoting there, I played only 18 games, 4 crowns, and 10 top 4s. For an average placement of 3.89, worse than my worst performance ever, worse than your. Is that actually worse than your worst performance?
I've got a 3.83 from episode 13.
3.98 from the ancient past. Yes, you have
Oh blimey, yeah, from episode 5, I recorded a 3.98. Do you want to go back to episode 5 and see what my excuse was that week?
So yeah, not quite the worst performance we've ever had, but not great from me. In terms of my tournament, I only played 3 rounds, even though I was still live at the end of 3 rounds, because I was feeling terrible.
Yeah.
I came 4th with Trophy Hunter, 2nd with Skip, and then 8th with Sadrak. That's where my Sadrak 8th came from. That was an incredibly tilting game, which is part of the reason I dropped. Turn 1, I had a 3-2 Sure Shot. I eeny-meenied into Sure Shot. Incredible start. My turn 1 opponent presents no units to mess up Sadrak, which I don't think is basically ever correct, but if you... I guess.
I think it's... So the reasons to present no units on turn 1, the usual reason, well, there's 2. You can have bought an O3 from the shop. There's no need to present it.
Yeah,
it just walks into their cutpurses or whatever.
Yeah.
Or you can have played a shrink ray on turn 1. We're going to get into later why I don't think that's correct either.
Sure. They hadn't bought a shrink ray and they were Wonder Waddle. It's possible they had bought like a Kitty Cutpurse or something, the issue is that even that, like, I am attacking first. If I bought like a Happy Little Tree or something, which is a totally reasonable turn 1 buy as Sadrak, you can win that. You can tie that.
You can gain that 3 life, which is really relevant.
Anyway, it's not a play I would make, but it got me when the next turn, my 3-2 Sure Shot attacked twice into 5 health minions, got no slays again, and then it didn't slay at all until 3.1, at which point it was irrelevant, and I just couldn't win a fight to save my life, didn't have a hero power, and it was absolutely disastrous. I mean, that is why people would think, like, it absolutely shut me down to have not presented a unit on turn 1. Like, I went from like that unit would have slayed every single time. I would have won fight 2, I would have won fight 3, I would have snowballed in the way that you would expect on Sadrak if my opponent had presented a tier 1 unit.
Well, I think the reason it shut you down is that your round 2 opponent was then also the strongest person in the lobby. Like, I think a 3-2 is still extremely likely to slay on 2.1.
Absolutely, and yeah, what had happened is that they had a forbidden fruit into a baby root, right? Is that they were able to they had 2 5 health units, like absolutely destroyed me. Yeah, just a tragic matchup that really like, and then I transitioned into dwarves and tried to get doubly to slay, but I wasn't strong enough to make that transition cleanly, and it was a disaster.
I do also like taking baby root against Sadrak in the early game, similar to taking a baby dragon against Pup. Like, actually getting that additional spike of value can be really good.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's terrible against a dragon, though. That's the issue, is that Sadrak often buys dragon, and that's awful. It is what it is. Again, fundamentally, I was not in the right place to be playing a tournament. I stood no chance.
I think that's why they gave Sadrak the built-in boots, right? Was to stop those feel bads when you roll the 25%, don't go first in round 1 or round 2 and haven't had a hero power.
Yeah, but that is absolutely what happened. And
they didn't give it the boots to make it a great dream target on tier 6. It does make it a great dream target.
So yeah, a bit of a disaster for me. Otherwise, this week, nothing. Again, it's a really small number of games. I played a lot of Peter Pants. I think Peter Pants is really good. Not enough reps on anything else to really stand out.
I'm a huge fan of Peter Pants in the current meta because it's the only hero where you don't go dwarves.
Sure.
As a default. And that's really good fun. Like, I like Pants' gameplay a lot at the moment. I think assembling Hatball is a good time. And picking between 6 different tier 3 treasures over the course of a game is a very different decision pattern.
Yeah. I will also say Hatball is much harder with my wrist in the state that it's in. My APM is half what it normally is at capacity. It's rough. The only other stat that stands out, I guess just mentioning, I came second with Skip in the tournament. Skip is often a hero that I don't recommend for tournament play because it's very risky, right? If you lose those early fights, you just fall way behind and can't catch up. I actually think Skip is in an okay place right now. He is able to get those scaling units ahead of other people. Struggles a little bit to be dwarves because you have less time to find Princess White and have fannies and so on. But pretty good at going slay, which is what I did. And yeah, I think we saw some good skips on coverage as well.
Yeah, we saw some skips picked in coverage from day 2 of the tournament. I think part of the reason for that is tier 4 these days is way less wide open. Yeah. I think almost everyone comes into tier 4 looking for Tweedledees and lightning dragons and mermaids, I guess, sporcos. And so getting 2 extra turns where the shops are just a bonanza of the things that no one has picked up yet can be really good.
Yeah, I'm way less likely to pick up a random nutcracker or whatever, or even Friendly Spirit, which has historically been a good unit. I don't have time for balls of stat. Like, Friendly Spirit is embarrassing compared to Tweedledee in a way that is probably an indicator that Tweedledee needs enough, which is coming, I hope.
I would like to point out to both you and the listeners that I did completely call this. Week 1 of this meta, I was like, I can't believe they let dwarves out of the door as powerful as this. Like, they gave us a Princess White that's playable and a Tweedledee that's busted.
You did call it, for sure.
And then they took away Bossy, and it was still the best thing in the game. On to our main topic this week. We're talking early game, and we're talking early game heuristics. When I say early game, I do mean super early game. We're talking turn 1, turn 2, and turn 3, 2.0, 2.1, and 2.2. So there's only going to be those 2-drop minions in the shop. They're all costing you 2 gold. And there's only going to be 1 of 10 spells available to you each turn.
Yeah, and we're trying to be relatively general here. Obviously, there is going to be tons of exceptions. Like, this isn't as simple as discussing heroes, where there is no context. There is a ton of context based on heroes. For example, Skip and Peter Pants don't even have a tier 2.
Yeah.
We're just ignoring those for the sake of this argument. There are going to be some times where individual heroes change evaluations. We might bring those up, but we're trying to be general about the way we play tier 2, the value judgments we were making, and this period of the game that's less context dependent than trying to talk about the mid game, for example, which is always been a nightmare to discuss because it's so different for everyone.
Yes, by the time you get to the mid game, you have so much information. You can actually pretty reliably play out the first few turns based on a few heuristics. So what do we mean when we say heuristic?
So a heuristic is kind of a mental shortcut. The point is, it's not a hard and fast rule, hence all the exceptions we were just talking about, but it's a mental shortcut. There's so much decision making in Storybook Rule. It's really important to have these shortcuts, and it's very clear that you have them when you play. Whenever you're rolling, you're not having to look at each individual minion and say, I don't want this, I don't want this, I don't want this. You don't have time. You have those mental shortcuts to go, I know Sure Shot is better than Kitty Cutpurse. You have to just have that programmed in. And we're just kind of talking about where we have made those value judgments and, kind of share them so that you can have a good idea of the kind of decisions that we kind of have already made.
Yes. These are the decisions that are locked and loaded coming into a game.
Yeah. Rules of thumb, all that sort of verbiage. But it's about trying... The turns on turn 2 are... You have a decent amount of time relative to the number of decisions you make. You do have time to think about these sorts of things. But it's still nice to have done a lot of that thinking ahead of time.
And it's nice to come to the right conclusions as well.
Yeah. That's the worst thing, is when you've got a heuristic that's wrong. One of the keys is to be able to take a step back and go, I'm buying a lot of happy little trees, assuming they're good. What if they aren't good? Sometimes you just have to take that step back and check that the mental shortcuts you've been making are still true, or if they were ever true.
I remember it was you, I think when we first started talking about the game, this might be pre-podcast, who pointed out that Rainbow Unicorn is actually just a reasonable number of stats to buy on turn 1.
Yeah.
And I'd just been assuming that Rainbow Unicorn was garbage and was just taking happy little trees and polywoggles over it and being like, yeah, 1-5. Don't need that in my life. I'm over you, Rainbow Unicorn. Oh no, actually you trade with all of the tutus. Or you beat all of the tutus and trade with everything else.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
There's no unbuffed unit that Unicorn loses to, right? Like, it's actually one of the best ways to win that turn 1 fight. So
Someone hasn't played a lot of Humpty Dumpties. So what's the number 1 unit that we're looking for on that first turn of the game in that opening shop, almost regardless of hero?
The answer to this is Cinderella as a standalone unit. Because fundamentally, a 2/2 is average stats for that tier, and a tier 2 treasure, although I don't value tier 2 treasures especially highly, the opportunity, because you spent 6 gold, to get 2 tier treasure, you spent 6 gold on units that even when combined are not really good enough for your board, and often makes you overall weaker than everyone else. Even with the treasure, helps you catch up a little bit. Tier 2 treasure's not that good.
When you glue your Minotaurs together,
It's
congratulations, you've traded 2 units that were each going to trade for one of your opponents for 1 unit that's going to trade for one of your opponents.
Yeah,
you are so much weaker right now.
Yeah, it sucks. But Cinderella has almost no opportunity cost. You're almost 100% to cast a spell on turn 2, and you're fairly likely to see, like, a lot of the spells in tier 2 and tier 3 just cost 0. Cast random falling stars, cast random candy rains, cast random free rolls. Cinderella will get there by 4.0 a huge percentage of the time, and then she's profited you gold, or she's been a 4/4, like she's a 4/4, that might still be fine depending on how early it is. She might find you the relevant tier 2 treasure that works to a hero. There's a ton of value of Cinderella. She's an okay static minion. Cinderella's what we're looking for. The only thing I think that would beat a Cinderella in terms of what I'm looking is a combination of cards, which would be a Sure Shot and a Lonely Prince. Or ideally, a Cinderella plus a Lonely Prince.
I was going to say, the ideal shop we're looking for on that first turn is Cinderella, Lonely Prince, Forbidden Fruit.
Yeah, that's unreal. Yeah, Lonely Prince is one of those units that's like incredibly feast or famine. You buy it, it's a 1/1. If you don't see any princesses for the next 2 shops, you're going to lose all those fights. And then by the time you see it on 3.0, it might be a bit late for it to even matter that much. But is in the content, like, a flipped Frog Prince is like S+, the best possible. And Sure Shot, I think, is probably the other really good unit, which helps. Like, you want those princesses anyway. A ranged unit is super likely to trade 2 for 1, and a bunch of the fights in the stage really come down to the card advantage that we talked a little bit about on the tournament coverage, if you want to go catch our snippet on there. Yeah, having a ranged unit that can pretty consistently shoot on those turns is huge.
Sure Shot's one of the most likely to stick around in your comp for a while as well. It falls off much less of a cliff because you can put it in that slot 5 and reliably get that 2 damage out of it, even going through tier 3.
Yeah. Mad Mim is the other one. It's not actually good on turn 2.0. You shouldn't even present it.
Yeah.
But in combination with a Sure Shot, or in combination with a Black Cat in particular, and it is by far, that I think is the unit that is most likely to stick around throughout tier 3. Like, I can have a Cinderella, a Mad Mim on 4.0 and not be upset, not happy, but it can do a lot of work for a while in a way that a unit like Rainbow Unicorn is a unit I'm happy with on turn 1, but not for very long.
The final thing to mention about Cinderella, I suppose, is pairs in the shop. If we're offered Cinderella and then a pair of other units, are there any pairs where we ignore the Cinderella and take... The one I'm thinking of here is Blind Mouse. I'm thinking if they're offered Blind Mouse, Cindy, Blind Mouse, there's heroes where it's obvious. If I'm Horde Dragon, if I'm Waddle, I'm taking the Mice.
Do you do that on Horde Dragon? I guess you'd. Yeah, okay. It's close.
But if we're imagining we're like Grandmother, we don't really have a hero power right now. We're just playing for this strength. Yeah.
A pair of mice is a really interesting comparison, because a pair of mice is like way better than 2 times as good as 2 mice.
There's a tiebreaker here, which is we're determining whether or not we're going to lock this shop, right? If we take the Cinderella, we're not going to lock the shop.
It's spell
And
dependent.
we can use that spell as a tiebreaker.
Yeah, for sure.
Obviously, there's two tiebreakers. We can use our hero power as a tiebreaker. We can use who we're paired against as a tiebreaker.
Yeah, fundamentally, I don't think there is a hard value on yes or no. I don't think I can create a heuristic for this scenario. Also, this will never come up. One of the things we're going to say, like, there are like 10,000 different shops that you can be off on turn 1 of the game. There are so many combinations of minions, then times by the 10 different spells you can find. There's a ton of different shops. When we come up with these specific scenarios of like Cinderella, mouse,
Shrink ray.
Yeah, sugar and spice. Like, whatever. Shrink ray, I think, is easy, right? Then you... no, Cinderella's shrink ray is really hard. I don't know.
No, shrink ray is easy. You take Cinderella, lock the shrink ray, and then you're always getting both mice, getting the tick on the Cinderella.
Yeah, you're right.
And living your best life.
So yeah, we can't possibly talk about individual shops too much, because there's too many, and they don't matter. But it's still useful as a theory crafting exercise and, as a point of discussion.
Yeah.
So that's the good stuff. That's what we want, ideally. Now there's going to be a little bit more disagreement, perhaps, on the bad stuff.
So I think worst of the worst, bottom of the bottom, we've got the evil units, Kitty Cutpurse and Labyrinth Minotaur.
Yeah, I'm especially low on Kitty Cutpurse. It betrayed me once recently, and I have never forgiven it. The issue with Kitty Cutpurse is that it doesn't ever slay. The number of units that you can actually attack into and win during those first few turns are incredibly slight. It's sure shot if you win the 50-50 to attack first. It's enemy Labyrinth Minotaurs and Tiny. And then otherwise it's units that people don't, especially at high levels, shouldn't be picking that often. Like, it's lonely princes without a princess.
I think Black Cat is the most likely to be picked because it is a 2/2, right? Like, if you're offered Black Cat 1/1/1/1, you're probably taking the Black Cat.
Yeah, agreed. Again, infinite context. But I think Kitty Cutpurse... I think, honestly, the most likely is Kitty Cutpurse winning the 50-50 into a sure shot. I think sure shot is the most likely unit for opponents to have bought on that first turn. My experience is Kitty Cutpurse doesn't slay very often, and when you're trying to do things like cast spells on it to make it a 2/2 to get it to slay, it doesn't pay off consistently enough, because even a 2/2 doesn't slay consistently by the second turn, where people can have random 3/4s or baby roots or all sorts of nonsense that can disrupt you, and you have to have attacked and not been attacked into. It's Kitty Cutpurse I have found to be a bit of a disaster. Maybe Cutpurse plus Mim is a thing people are doing, but I have also been disappointed by that.
Yeah, if there's a Cutpurse and a Mim in my first shop, I'm probably going to take the Cutpurse, lock the Mim.
Agreed. I might buy the Mim and let the Cutpurse go. Again, tons of context, tons of spell decisions and stuff going on there, but like, Cutpurse Mim is never... you are incapable of winning the fight on turn 2, and then you have 5 gold on the turn 3, which is nothing still. Like, it's all a disaster. Kitty Cutpurse is a really sketchy unit. Humpty Dumpty is also another point of contention that we'll get to. But Labyrinth Minotaur, the thing with Labyrinth Minotaur is that it does trade in a similar way to Tiny. Labyrinth Minotaur is roughly the same as Tiny in terms of nothing actually has 6 toughness during that stage game. Again, caveats. Rainbow Unicorn sometimes is a 2/6. It's part of the reason making Rainbow Unicorn a 2/6 is so good, is it beats up Minotaurs. But also the extra power Labyrinth Minotaur provides is basically irrelevant. Black Cat Minotaur, pretty okay. You're getting a 2/1 and then a 2/1, which both can trade.
Yeah, you get to double down on that power with a Black Cat, which is really nice. It increases the odds that a Cutpurse slays.
Yep. Again, combining 2 bad units to make an okay thing is not a thing I want to be doing. And Labyrinth Minotaur Mad Mim has some synergy, because giving Mim attack lets her use her toughness, but the Minotaur doesn't. Is the Minotaur going behind the Mim? What are you doing? Like, that can be okay on 2.2, right? Where you go like, unit in front of my Mim, unit in front of my Mim. Minotaur can go in the back, that's fine. Then you're getting a little bit of value there, but it's just... Minotaur is awkward. It doesn't actually synergize that well with the other evil units. And fundamentally, like, I'll take it over a 1/1. Again, I do tend to take Labyrinth Minotaur over a Lonely Prince that can't flip. I'll definitely take it over Kitty Cutpurse. I most of the time will take it over Happy Little Tree. But it's not great.
I think giving Mim attack can be a downside, but not until much later in the game.
Yes, I agree that can definitely be a problem. But on those early turns, actually, a 1/3 does beat trades for a 2/2. I'll take it.
Yeah, it can genuinely do some work by attacking. Let's talk about Humpty Dumpty. You listed Humpty Dumpty among the bad units there. Yeah. Obviously, the downside of Humpty Dumpty is that you get your 7/7 front loaded, but then once it's dead, you don't get that gold back. You're not able to resell it to the shop, and you've lost the most important unit from your board. Humpty Dumpty has two relevant upsides.
Yep.
One is that you're very likely to win the fights when you take Humpty Dumpty, which means that if you're Horseman or if you're Loki with a For Glory, if there's some additional value to winning those fights for you, you can get that value back off the Humpty Dumpty. The other is that if you triple Humpty Dumpty, you get access to the best tier 2 treasure in the game. Easter egg is the only tier 2 treasure that offers really consistent scaling to your board. It also gives you a really powerful unit in this, what is it, an 1818 Humpty Dumpty? 1770.
Yeah.
I think it grows so quickly, I lose track. Oh, normally it's got +1 from the Snow Angel. That's why I think it's an 1818 in my head.
Sure.
I've worked out where that stat was coming from. Yes, and so Easter egg is a reason to take Humpties when you see Humpty pairs.
Yeah. A few things I want to say about this. First of all, I am one of the biggest Humpty haters out there. Like, I will admit, I am probably I don't take Humpty Dumpty enough, probably. Because fundamentally, the high roll is high, but the low roll is really low. And I have been burned so many times in a way that hurts me deeply.
I think the correct heuristic is never take Humpty Dumpty.
It can't be never. Yes, I think as a heuristic, never take Humpty Dumpty is an okay place to be. I think there are a decent number of exceptions, and the most common by a lot is turn 2, the spell in my shop is For Glory. Because For Glory pays it off immediately.
Yes.
Like, For Glory is my spell on that turn. I have to cast it, because rolling is nothing. Like, rolling is realistically awful. You know, maybe you'll hit Cinderella plus free roll and not be too upset or something, but like you're having a bad time at that point.
It's tiny extra percentage at a pair if you desperately want a pair for your Tiger or your Horde Dragon or what have you.
Or yeah, if you're a hero, you know, a hero who wants specific minions, it can be worth rolling in that spot. Miri will happily roll for a royal, whatever. But most of the time, Humpty Dumpty plus For Glory is a thing I will do on turn 2. I won't buy a Humpty Unlocker For Glory. That's nonsense. Humpty Dumpty is also a unit that sometimes I will buy on a hero when I'm offered 2 other garbage units, say Humpty Dumpty, Cutpurse, or something. You know, two 1/1s that I don't want.
Yeah.
So my option is lose the next 2 fights, probably, or take this Humpty Dumpty and hope that I can get somewhere. If I'm a late game enough hero, a hero that can make up that tempo, or Loki, who has the opposite problem, who has a bunch of very good early tempo and can make up for the loss of a unit, then I'm more likely to take it. But generally speaking, what has happened far too often for me is you buy Humpty Dumpty and you happen to face the person who has 3 units on turn 2, or some ridiculous, like they flipped a Polywoggle on turn 1, or some other disaster.
People who go all in on power, like, it doesn't take more than, like, a Minotaur and a Mim that we just discussed.
Yeah.
And your Humpty can just trade for a Black Cat.
Exactly.
It's gross.
Like, I've had so many disasters now. Like, the actual worst ever was turn 2, I have Humpty Humpty, I can't remember what my spell was, like a reroll.
For Glory.
Like, it must have been Humpty Humpty For Glory, and my opponent also had Humpty Humpty, and we both lost. Like, it was absolute disaster. They came 8th. I managed to, like, I was Gwen and managed to stabilize into a 5th, but it was an absolute disaster. Like, I hate Humpty because the low rolls are so low, and I think I'm competent enough of a player most of the time that I can steer even a middling early game into better than the disaster scenario that Humpty Dumpty cracking puts you in.
Yes, Humpty Dumpty really puts all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah, for sure. I'll acknowledge the pun, but I won't laugh.
Humpty Dumpty forms a really interesting prisoner's dilemma on the meta, that if nobody else is taking Humpty Dumpties, the upside of taking Humpty Dumpty is much higher. And if everybody else is taking Humpty Dumpties, the downside is much higher.
Yeah, for sure. And it's all context dependent as well. Like, now that Merlin is worse, Humpty Dumpty is better, because Merlin was one of the best Humpty Dumpty killers, and you know, various other weird bits of consideration that you can think about, you know, which hero, like, I think about Humpty Dumpty a lot more than I take it. Like, the number of times where I'm making a decision and I go, how likely is my opponent to have taken a unit that will trade for a Humpty Dumpty or have a Humpty Dumpty themselves affects my decision making a lot. I often will choose to buy something like a Minotaur or a Tiny against an opponent that I think is more likely to have a Humpty Dumpty than someone who is pretty unlikely to. Something like a Piper or a Wonder Waddle is almost 0% to have a Humpty Dumpty, and so I feel a little safer buying Humpty against them. There's a bunch of quite interesting decision points you can make about, you have to try and get in the seat of your opponent of, why on earth would a Charon have a Humpty Dumpty? That's ridiculous. What is happening? And then they do and you cry, but you've got to try and make these judgments.
I lost to a Charon with 2 Humpty Dumptys on 2.1 the other day, and I was so confused.
Yeah, the Humpty Dumpty plus Charon, not a combo. He doesn't steal the buff, at least, I believe. I believe the buff will go to the first non-Humpty unit to die.
That is news to me, but I can't imagine. Why was it the first unit to die? What did you do?
Yeah.
While we're not forming a full tier list, there's a couple more tier 2 units I want to discuss. One is Fanny.
Yep.
I think this is another one of those that's really good in combination. Like, I think
Of course.
Fanny with an excuse to lock another Fanny or a Crafty in the shop so that you're getting your 4/4's worth of stats as soon as possible. It's quite similar to Lonely Prince in that regard.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think Fanny it's probably the best of the 2/2s other than Cinderella, on the basis that the ups, like, she's a 4/4 as soon as you find another dwarf, and can be a 6/6 pretty quickly, which is way better than the other supports if you can find the pieces. And especially in a meta like right now, where dwarves is in a very good place. I'm at the point where I'm picking Crafty over Billy Gruff a decent percentage of the time, because I think dwarves is in such a good place. There are definitely times where I would never have done that, because Billy Gruff wins me the fights in a way that Crafty doesn't. But
Yes.
I'm very high on dwarves at the moment, and if I can find an excuse to start, if I have a Crafty, I can pick a Fanny, and that's a great place to start.
Yes, you don't want to take your Princess White plus Fanny and then be like, man, I have this awkward 2/2 here. I'm actually quite weak for a turn, trying to make this dwarves thing come together.
Buy them the other order, and it's a 3/3. But
That's what I said.
you said a 2/2. It's fine.
That's true. I forgot to ask about Lonely Prince. Are we taking Lonely Prince over a 2/2 without a princess in the shop?
I'm pretty unlikely to do that. I'm definitely not doing that if I've already bought the Cinderella. They're literally halves the number of princesses that are available in the tier 2 shop. It's pretty disastrous. Generally speaking, I will buy a 2/2 again. So much context, but generally speaking, I will be built by a 2/2 over a Lonely Prince, a speculative Lonely Prince, because you are sacrificing a lot. Like, it is a big stat difference at that stage of the game, and it's not like you don't get free rolls. You're only going to see 4 units on 2.2, and the odds that you get there are not super high. You can't afford to take a free, like, unless free roll is your spell, you can't afford to roll. That's a disaster.
Yeah.
So yeah, I generally speaking don't speculate on Lonely Prince. I'm sure I could find a dozen situations where I would.
Yes. Finally, before we move on to an hour-long argument about the spells,
Yeah.
there's 2 units that are less units and more game mechanic. We have the Golden Chicken.
Yep.
I'm actually way down on buying Golden Chicken on the 2.0 at the moment, because the most likely time that I'm going to sell the first unit I buy, if I'm selling that back, is 3.0.
Yeah.
I haven't found another way to get to 6 gold, and this unit is the one that I bought with no synergies at all. I had no information. Since then, I've been building a comp, possibly around that unit, possibly around something else. That's the most likely time I am to say, okay, we're moving off of this black cat. It's just some random stats, and it's time to buy 2 3-drops out of the shop. Let's grab our Lucky and our Brave Princess and go. Selling a Golden Chicken on that turn is terrible. Like, I've got this gold left over for a spell or nothing.
So my disagreement here is that I like having, what I think that does is give me the ability to roll on 3.0. I hate rolling on 3.0 because it's terrible. Like,
yes. But I don't like rolling on 3.0 at all.
But the best example, like, there are plenty of 3.0 shops where there's 1 3-drop you want and no 2-drops you want, because they're just like random trash. They're the same as your units. Like,
yes, there can be a lot of trash left in the shop by 3.0. If people have bought all of the good 2-drops at that point.
Yeah. Oh, good, happy little tree on 3.0. Like, there can be a lot of trash, and then
thank God you're here, Wizards Familiar.
And it's also possible that a bunch of the 3-drops can be like, something like speculating on Queen of Hearts when you don't have any evil units, doubly without any synergy, Creeper without any synergy.
3.0 Sleeping Princess can be awkward.
Yeah, there's a ton of situations where you just don't want to buy the things on your shop in 3.0, and rolling hurts a lot, because you're left with 4 gold, which is going to be 1 unit, and now you're sad. But if you roll and have a chicken, I can sell that and buy 2 3-drops still. I really like that as an option. It comes up a lot. I can point to a lot of games where I have rolled on 3.0 because and only because I had a chicken, and that gives me twice as many looks at the honestly very spiky 3.0 minions. Like, the difference between getting a prized pig or a white stag on those turns, even a Lucky and an Ogre Princess, there's just so many really huge payoffs that you can hit on 3.0.
Yes. Like, being able to get your Princess White or your Brave Princess as early as possible is huge.
Yeah, it makes a massive difference when you get to buy a playable tier 3 unit as opposed to where you don't. And I really like the main thing that I think Chicken does is enable me to take that role. And I like that option.
So are we taking Chicken over...
Find a 2-2.
Yeah, no. I'm not just throwing up random examples. I'm trying to find this line. So we're definitely taking Chicken over Cutpurse. We're taking Chicken over Minotaur. Are we taking Chicken over Bad Billy Gruff? Because if we're taking Crafties and Fannies in a Dwarf's heavy meta over Bad Billy Gruff.
Turn 1, I would take Billy Gruff. Turn 2.2, I would seriously consider the Chicken. Because, again, it depends on the overall strength of my board. If I think if I'm up a unit, Golden Chicken is definitely at its best when I'm already up a unit. Whether that's Shrink Ray or whether that's extra Econ, whatever. If I've got 5 units, having my 5th be Chicken is amazing, because then I'm looking to sell one anyway. That's a great time to take that roll and try and high roll, because I'm a little bit ahead anyway. That's when pigs are really good, I'm a little bit ahead.
Yes.
Again, this is the problem, that even by 2.2, there's just infinite, asterisks on a lot of this. But the issue with Billy Gruff has always been that he falls off a cliff. He doesn't really synergize with basically anything.
True.
He can lead you into Queen of Hearts. He's good with the evil support, I guess. But a 2-3, although it wins those fights very, very early, incredibly rapidly falls off in a way that Chicken makes my 3.0 much higher percentage. So I think...
And if you get there on 3.0, if you get a shop that is Princess White plus 2-drop, the Chicken's not going anywhere. That's still a savings account. You're going to get that gold back one day.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing, is that, the Chicken is still better than the Billy Gruff on 3.0 if you don't sell it, because of the potential to have the upside going forward. Then you can, double sell the Chicken, add another unit, and buy 3-drops on 3.1, and that's also amazing. You can do some good stuff at that point. So I think Chicken, worse than Billy Gruff on turn actual 2.0, because Billy Gruff might win you 2 fights that Chicken would have lost you at that point, right? Because it's going to win you the fight on turn 1, and it really helps on the fight on turn 2. By 2.2, even if that 1 toughness makes a difference, the 1 gold is more valuable in the very near future, given that Billy Gruff wasn't hanging around most of the time anyway.
Finally, I want to quickly mention Polywoggle.
Yep, if you're a hero who can buff power, buy Polywoggle. So Charon, Merlin, if you're still playing Merlin, maybe even Galahad, maybe even Gwen, who can really benefit from flipping a Polywoggle. Maybe if you have a Mim.
Knight it after you flip it. Don't knight it to make it flip. That's garbage.
The number of knighted polys I've seen. Oh, don't do that, please. It does make it more likely to slay, but it is not worth it. Because it'll flip into a Darkwood Creeper and you'll die.
That doesn't even sound like the worst case scenario. That Creeper's going to grow quite quickly. It'll flip into a sleeping princess and you'll die.
Sure. I treat Polywoggle as unplayable without one of those ways to buff it. Even Eeny Meeny can be enough, right? But a 1-1
What does that mean?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Polywoggle doesn't get there very often. It's incredibly high risk. And the main thing is a little bit like Humpty Dumpty. You should think about opposing Polywoggles more than you should think about what am I doing with my Polywoggles, because that's why you shouldn't present an 0-3 on turn 1, for example, because it's just giving your opponent's Polywoggles the opportunity to slay that they didn't deserve, and that can catapult them into a lead. It can be disgusting when an opponent flips a Polywoggle. So I don't tend to buy Polywoggles. Again, tons of reasons why you might. It's definitely a high roll option. If you're in a tournament where first is the only way you can ever succeed, I'm a little bit more likely to take a Polywoggle, because you know what, when it flips into a pig and I win the next 7 fights in a row, great.
Yeah, let's go all in on that 10%, possibly less chance that it flips turn 1.
Exactly. That 10% to win the game can be worth it when you absolutely need to. And honestly, the fail case on Polywoggle, it's not that bad. It's pretty bad. It's definitely a lot worse than a 2-2, but it's not actual disaster town. Yeah. That's the units. Obviously, a lot of that is relatively self-explanatory. I think a lot of people have a good sense of how good the titty units are. You've made a ton of those. You make those decisions every single game. You've seen your opponents make those decisions every game. I'm lower on Happy Little Tree than most. I know a lot of people buy Happy Little Tree on 2.0 and I don't, but I think for the most part, a lot of that is self-explanatory. It's still worth talking about. It's still, those value judgments. I've definitely come down on Billy Gruff and to some extent Rainbow Unicorn relative to where I used to be. I think in part because I've moved up on the dwarves.
Yes.
Like the fact that Fanny, especially Crafty, when Crafty was a 1-1, I was so low on it, and now there's an additional 2-2 in that position. It definitely changes my value on those things. Like you're way less those examples of my shop is all 1-1s just happen way less now that Crafty isn't a unit that you can see.
Yes, definitely. And that Tiny is a defensible unit. It's not very good. We haven't mentioned it, but it's sort of straight down the middle. Tiny and Baby Dragon. They're kind of the 5 out of 10s on this list, I would say.
Yeah, I'm not huge on Baby Dragon. I think Baby Dragon I would often take below something like a Crafty or a Golden Chicken. The only difference it makes in trading is with, like, obviously when you get their support, it's disgusting, but a lot of people play around Baby Dragon, especially at high lobbies, high elos, and then it trades better with Rainbow Unicorn and Billy Gruff, but it trades with all the 2/2s exactly the same. So yeah. I'm often disappointed by Baby Dragon.
So there are 10 spells that you can see in your first and second and third shops. They are all castable on 2 or fewer gold. Several of them can generate you more gold than you lose.
Yeah, and this is really why we've decided to do this episode, is that me and Jethro fundamentally disagree on which spells we're willing to lock for.
Yes, so on the first turn of the game, there's only really, I think, one spell that it's correct to cast. It's free roll. Free roll is always there. It's always an option.
Yep.
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo on turn 1. Are there shops you don't eeny, meeny, miny, mo on turn 1? I was struggling to think of one looking at the characters. I guess it would be Cinderella garbage, right?
That's a good example. There are Humpty often gives me a big pause.
But the 8/8 Humpty doesn't trade with their Humpties. I don't understand Sid's opinion on this at all.
And there are other situations, like, again, synergy. For example, in the Sadrak game in my tournament, I can definitely... I chose to Eeny Meeny to try and hit it on when I had a sure shot. Like, I'm playing Sadrak, and I could have just taken the safe sure shot rather than Eeny Meeny and try and hit it. Fundamentally, the other units in the shop were a half little tree and another unit I would have been okay with. So I took the Eeny Meeny, and you know that. I've already had that disaster story. But I can definitely see people who go, I think sure shot is so important to the Sadrak game plan, I would rather have a sure shot than risk it. Whereas my thought was, well, Eeny Meeny massively increases the chance that it actually gets to slay. So much for that.
The other thing to mention about Eeny Meeny is that it's almost always correct to buy and sell a chicken out of the shop first.
Yep.
A 3/3 chicken can be better than the average in the shop. It's worth checking. But most of the time, you want to maximize your chances of high rolling the Eeny Meeny.
Yeah, agreed. So yeah, there are little caveats for the Eeny Meeny, but almost always correct to cast it.
We've also got to mention that it doesn't flip Lonely Prince. If you Eeny Meeny into a princess, doesn't count as buying. The Lonely Prince will stay as a mom.
Shard of the Ice Queen is the other one. I will almost always cast Shard of the Ice Queen if given the option to buy any good unit and shard it. Even the really good, we were talking about, not a flipped Lonely Prince, but even a Sure Shot, which we said is one of the better units, and there are a bunch of evil units we don't really like. Shard is still enough stats that actually, Kitty Cutpurse is way better as a 2/2. A 6/2 Minotaur is meaningfully better. Black Cat is now effectively a 3/3. You can get a 3/4 Billy Gruff. Basically, all of them are like
getting that 1 power on the Mim.
Yeah. Basically, all of the evil units you're happy that you've sharded into. Minotaur's probably the worst of them, but you'll take it. And I almost always, almost 100% to cast shard on turn 1. Now, then the question becomes, which spells are you willing to lock? And here is where we disagree. I am pretty low on locking for spells. I think the ability to high roll for Shrink Spell or Forbidden Fruit, those spells that put you up a minion, either on that turn or the turn after, is significant. It's a huge boost. And I think the power level on the others are relatively flat. So the misses, the spells you don't want on 2.1, this is a relevant point.
Yes.
What we don't want is free rolls a disaster. Free roll, seeing more shops, I still can only buy 1 unit, and choosing the best of 9, which isn't even what it is. It's, you get some extra looks, is kind of irrelevant, fundamentally. You're more likely to find, Sure Shot. Lonely Prince gets better if free roll is around, but it's still basically nothing. There
are shops on 2.1 where it's correct to spend 1 gold rolling the shop rather than casting the free roll.
Yeah, for sure. If Shard of the Ice Queen is something you're actively looking for, that's basically the only situation where that's true. But
Shard or Eeny Meeny and this shop is bad.
Yeah. For sure. So yeah, free roll's the disaster, and For Glory is the tons of asterisks, probably pretty bad, right? A lot of the time, For Glory is textless. I didn't get any stronger. In fact, I'm on average weaker than everyone else because everyone else cast a combat spell or a spell that gave them stats, because almost all of these spells give stats. Unless I'm a hero with a very relevant hero power or I have a Humpty Dumpty, For Glory is almost always a disaster on 2.1. Yeah. It definitely can be extremely high roll, but usually it's a disaster. And so that's the situation we're trying to avoid is by locking random +1/+1s, we are avoiding the situation where we are forced to have free roll or fold.
Yes, or magic research.
Yes. Magic research is not as disastrous as For Glory, because you don't get to keep the stats unless you win the fight, but the +1/+1 you're getting is as good as the +1/+1 anyone else is getting. Realistically, it's as much as the stats from Eeny Meeny, it's as good as Sugar Spice or Witch's Brew, it's as good as the stats from Shard. You are matching the stats of whoever you were facing, and so again, infinite context, you're about 50-50 to win that fight, right?
No, I think magic research is below average. Is that true? Hang on.
So if they've cast Shrink Ray, Shrink Spell on turn 2, which is the normal time, you're stronger than them. Eeny Meeny Sugar and Spice, Witch's Brew, the same. Full Glory, you're better. Genie's Wish is a wash. Shard is the same. The only one that's better than the stats Magic Research provides is Forbidden Fruit. You're definitely going to lose the Forbidden Fruit player, almost, unless they bought loads of 1/1s and you were buffing something. Yeah.
Assuming that hero powers are a wash, so you're slightly below 50%. 50% of a Witch's Brew is so bad. I'm not saying we don't cast it on turn 2.1. Of course we cast it, but it's not good. We're not locking for it. That would be insane.
No. Magic Research. Magic Research is also definitely bad. And actually, honestly, the ability to tie probably puts it a decent way below 50%. Like, Magic Research is upsetting. I'm not happy with my Magic Research. There are definitely, Magic Research on a Unicorn, a unit that is designed to win those early fights and massively benefits from +1/+1 is fine. Magic Research on my Wizard's Familiar or something, that can be okay.
Magic Research on a Sure Shot or a flipped Lonely Prince, because you can go past some breakpoints from 5/5 to 6/6.
But generally, yes, Magic Research is also Full Glory, Magic Research, and Free Roll are the three we're really trying to avoid. So there's two actual disasters and one pretty low roll. And then the high rolls are Shrink Spell and Forbidden Fruit, right? Those are the two really good ones.
Yes, these are worth an additional unit if we see them on turn 2.
Yeah, and
I think Genie's Wish might be a high roll as well.
I also agree.
I'm usually very excited to see Genie's Wish, partly because of the potential for the super high roll of Shrink Spell, partly because a lot of the time you've got a Cinderella.
Or Eeny Meeny. Genie's Wish into Eeny Meeny is also way better, because that's actually economy at that point. And again, you have a decent amount of control. If you've bought a neutral unit, Genie's Wish can only cast, it can't cast Shard, ever.
Nope.
It can't cast Witch's Brew or Sugar Spice if you've got a neutral unit. And again, you can buy the Genie's Wish before you buy something from the shop. You usually should, unless it's Cinderella. It's great with Cinderella, certainly. Sometimes it'll cast Free Roll, and it's the same as having rolled the shop. It's still slightly better than just casting the Free Roll, because
one day a Storm King will fall out of your wombats and it'll be slightly bigger.
Forbidden Fruit's the disaster of Genie's Wish.
Yes.
You still got 3 gold. You took 2 damage. Oh my god, it's terrible. If you had a Cinderella, though, you'd still take it. But yes, Genie's Wish, I think, is also a high roll. So the spells we're looking for, Shrink Spell, Forbidden Fruit, Genie's Wish, the spells we don't want.
And therefore, we're almost always locking those on turn 1.
Yes,
it's dependent a little bit on your units, but assuming 3 average units, I'm always going to lock.
Shrink Spell and Forbidden Fruit, I lock almost 100% of the time. Genie's Wish, I'm more likely to look at the units, and I wouldn't lock a bad shop with a Genie's Wish, because it is riskier. Inherently, I certainly would lock it with a Cinderella. I would certainly lock it with a single unit in the shop that I was actively looking to buy. But I'm less likely to lock, random 2/2 Genie's Wish.
I think I'm also not 100% to lock Genie's Wish.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But fundamentally, where we disagree is that you are saying you're willing to lock for the kind of consolidation, the fine spells. Sugar and Spice and Witch's Brew, right? This is the sticking point, is that you're happy to lock Sugar and Spice when it's with a Sure Shot, and or with a Unicorn, both of which, by the way, massively benefit from Sugar and Spice. It is a huge increase to both of those units' power levels to give them a Sugar and Spice. Unicorn in particular, a 2/6 is twice as good as a 1/5. A 1/5 doesn't beat a 2/3, whereas a 2/6 is a 2/2 after beating a 2/3. It's leagues better. And so there, those breakpoints can be really important.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting difference point for us.
I want to talk about the total, in terms of the total amount of stats you're presenting. It's often quite similar and usually better, right? Sugar and Spice is better than buying a 1/1 in terms of the board strength on those turns. But my goal in that early game is not necessarily to win all my fights, although I definitely want that. Life is very valuable. It's to make sure I'm as strong as possible going into the more relevant damaging phases of tier 3, being able to protect a pig, for example, and having an extra unit. I would much rather have a Sure Shot and a textless 1/1 than a 3/2 Sure Shot, because I can sell that textless 1/1 and be able to, for example, buy 2 3/3s, 2 3-drops on 3.0. The ability to sell, to be able to get that gold back, even if it's only half, kind of half the gold. I'm willing to Forbidden Fruit to get a textless 1/1, even though I'm down a bunch of life, because the ability to sell and be ahead on economy on those pivotal 3.0, 3.1 turns is enough of a swing that I'm interested.
Interesting. It's interesting to link this to our discussion of economy, because it's the permanent nature of this buff that really makes me want to get it. Because as you've just said, that ++1, the sure shot is worth more than the 1/1, which
definitely.
means that the sure shot is more able to defend the pig than the 2/1 sure shot and the 1/1, right? I'm stronger right now, which gives me more ability to snowball, and I've got the life cushion because I was more likely to win those earlier fights.
The difference comes from how much better 3-drops are than every single 2-drop. When I
Sure.
sell random 2-drop and buy, like, selling a 2/2 to buy a stag is a ridiculous power spike.
Oh, my
That's
word.
unreal. That's +7/+7. What on earth? That's like,
Yeah.
and you know, even if it's not a huge statted unit, it can be extra econ that snowballs and so on. I want the ability, and the problem with, you know, if I just have 4 units going into 3.0 and I have to sell one to double buy, is that a lot of the units get a lot worse if you don't have bodies to work with them. Both things, stag is a really good example. If I don't have 2 units to put behind the stag and 2 units to put in the front to support, to stop the stag getting attacked into, my stag is a lot worse. All my supports get significantly more awkward if I don't have the raw bodies to put in front of everything.
Yep.
And the flexibility that number of bodies gives you is more valuable to me than these permanent stats. And of course the caveat of how permanent even are they? Like a 2/6 unicorn and we're talking about the definitely the good cases here, right? Like sure shot and unicorn, these are definitely good. Witch's Brew in particular, none of the evil units with +1/+1 are even good.
Yes, we're talking about these as though they're interchangeable. And of course, they're slightly not. The Sugar and Spice has basically no bad targets. Like, I
Yeah.
guess Baby Root isn't a great target.
Happy Little Tree is a little bit of a weird one, because how did you end up having a Happy Little Tree?
But it is good. It is good to put 2 power on your Happy Little Tree.
Yeah.
If you have one, if you took one because you were Sadrak and your opponent presented no board, like, you're better off being able to Sugar and Spice it.
Yeah, like,
Evils, it gets interesting because of Kitty Cutpurse. Because if we give Kitty Cutpurse +1/+1 and it can get that slay, it's giving us that econ that the extra unit would have given us.
so this is putting bad on bad, which I hate. Like, the problem, we're talking about buying a Kitty Cutpurse and casting Witch's Brew on a Kitty Cutpurse on exactly 2.1. Maybe we bought it on, maybe we're locking the Kitty Cutpurse in the shop, maybe we bought it on turn 1. If we bought it turn 1 and it failed to slay, we end up in the same situation. Regardless, we have chosen to lock a bad unit. Like, what we've done is we've assembled and locked a 2/2 that even if it slays, gives us 5 gold on a turn where 5 gold isn't very good. Like, that's the problem, is that what we've assembled is a unit that has to slay on exactly that turn, because a 2/2 will not slay on 3.0. That's insane. Not very often, certainly. Way less than 50%, I would imagine.
Put it behind your stag. What are you doing?
I don't think Kitty Cutpurse slays very consistently at all going forward, so you're trying to invest right now, and I think the payoff is pretty low. I think it's bad.
I mean, the key payoff turn is 2.2. If you're able to slay on 2.2, you take the 6 gold in 3.0, you can buy the 2 3-drops.
For sure. It is a lot, like, I agree that, but again, by that point, Kitty Cutpurse is, like, it's never 100%, obviously, and it's probably way less than 50%, I would guess, because a lot of people, like, there are boards where it's close to 100%, right? If you attack first, they've got a bunch of mims with high power and they don't have any toughness, you're going to get there. But a lot of the time, like, anything with a Baby Root, anything with a unicorn, like, if they attack into you, it's a disaster. Anything with a Sugar and Spice itself, like, you can get absolutely like, it's not that likely to slay for a unit that you've put a bunch of effort into and cost yourself a lot. The opportunity cost is really high, is my point. Like, it's not that it's a bad thing. If I'm offered Kitty Cutpurse plus Witch's Brew on 2.1, fine, I'll take it, I guess. I'm not crying myself to sleep at that point, but I'm just, the opportunity cost of locking that shop is high. Like, not only are you costing yourself the opportunity to high roll with the spells, you're also costing yourself a look at a shop that might contain Lonely Prince Cinderella or some other extremely high roll.
We've got to talk about the elephant in the room, which is the unit. Fundamentally, the difference between us here is that I'm locking for a medium turn 2.1. Because you know roughly, you get one new unit in the shop going from 2.0 to 2.1. You know roughly what your 2.1 is going to be once you've locked that Sugar and Spice.
Yeah,
you know, I'm going to buy this baby dragon and then Sugar and Spice my sure shot.
Oh god, that locking for that sounds disastrous to me. Like, okay, that's actually a great example. Okay, sure, that's fine. So you on 2.0, you're offered the opportunity of so sure shot, dragon, Sugar and Spice, garbage, whatever that garbage is. Wizard's Familiar. I don't know, something.
I was going to say, whatever this garbage is, I'm going to be so excited to take it.
And so you're playing out this situation of, cool, by the end of that turn, I can have a 3/2, two 3/2s, one of which has ranged. And
Yep.
I would not settle for that. I would say the fail case, there are the times where your board is worse than that by just letting your shop roll is really low. I think there are tons of ways that it can be much, much better. And I think that the fail case of I just buy a sure shot, let it go, and then, then the fail case is I have a 2/1 ranged and a 2/2 or something, and then like a spell, like plenty of the other spells. The absolute worst case is I end up with like a 1/1 and a free roll. It's a disaster, but it's really hard to be offered a shoppable 1/1s. Most of the time you'll get at worst a 2/2, and a lot of the time you get the high roll. I'm just like, there's enough tier 2 shops that can be significantly better than the case you're settling for. And I think the disaster scenarios aren't frequent enough to deny myself the ability to high roll. Like even not spell-based combos like Fanny Crafty. I would sell that sure shot by Fanny Crafty, and that's a stronger board than the hypothetical we were suggesting.
I mean, it doesn't beat my hypothetical. In fact, it always ties with my hypothetical. If you go first, your Crafty attacks into Baby Dragon. I shoot Crafty, and then we trade. If I go first, I kill your support, and then we trade. Like...
Oh, you're putting the dragon in slot 1. Interesting.
I don't think it makes a difference, but yes, I won.
Yeah, like it's... I agree, but I think in general a 4/4 and a 2/2 is a stronger overall.
Yeah, because I think the dragon taking out like a baby root is going to be really... is going to help you win that fight a lot better than the range shot, right?
Sure.
And it doesn't matter if they go first. Anyway.
Regardless, I think there are enough avenues that lead me to a high roll, and denying yourself the ability to get to those is a higher opportunity cost than you're kind of min-maxing. You're trying to elevate your worst case scenario.
I think that you're min-maxing. I think that you are rolling the dice on trying to get a crit or a 1, and I'm saying no. Give me the average.
I just like what I'm saying is that the average power level of 2-drops is flat enough that the disaster scenarios basically don't exist. Especially now that Crafty's a 2/2, there just aren't that many units that are actual garbage. That are the Kitty Cup like.
Bear in mind that you think that compared to me, and I'm higher on Humpty Dumpty than you.
Yeah,
like there's more garbage for you in these shops than there is for me. Because you're lower on Humpty Dumpty and Cutpurse.
Like the number of shops that contain nothing of value, where all 3 of the units and the spell are bad, is not high enough for me to be concerned with that scenario relative to the ability, the number... I don't know the maths on the number of shops that I would consider a nut roll versus the number of shops I would consider a disaster, but I suspect that the number of shops I consider a disaster are fewer.
No, I thought this with Kitty Cutpurse, that we can't, as humans, compute this level of maths. No. The final point I want to make on this, and you can make as many points as you like after this, is I don't think high rolling the super early game is worth as much as not low rolling the super early game.
Oh, that's definitely a point I agree with.
I think, and this goes to some of the externalities that we ruled out, which is that your hero power and who you're paired against in the lobby. It doesn't matter if you have the strongest possible early game. If you got that Cinderella Lonely Prince, if you're paired against a Loki or a Share Bear who has 2 extra units on you, you're going to lose. If you're paired against the person who's bought a bunch of Humpty Dumptys, you're going to lose. Like, it can, for random reasons, not matter that you pulled ahead in the early game.
And interestingly, that's exactly why I don't like Humpty Dumpty. And it's absolutely a point I agree with, is that, like, in my head, I'm very happy. Like, the reason I don't take Humpty Dumpty is I want to avoid those disaster scenarios, and I'm okay with a middling early game. Like, I'm curious to do the math. Like, I don't even know how I would begin to do the math on calculating the number of boards, the number of shops that I consider better than average. Like it's important. Again, I think you're right that just it's kind of beyond human computation. I can't.
I think you have to go through all of the 10,000 shops and determine whether they're above or below average. Like it's that or assign point values to the units, but they have so much. There's so much interconnectedness even at this level that you can't assign a numerical value to the unit.
Yeah. So at that point, I'm going on gut feeling, and my instinct is that there are enough micro synergies between tier 2 units that I am, and I think, and maybe it's that I'm valuing the shrink raise and the forbidden fruits extremely highly. I do. I really think they make it not like, even if they don't win you the fights, I think being ahead a unit
Being ahead by that gold is really useful.
Is massive.
I mean, it's the reason Sharebear and Cursed King are playable, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Like it's it's weird to do a podcast where we don't come to a strong evaluation. I can't point you to why I believe it is better. Like I can't give you the numbers. I can't prove to you what I feel. But I am willing. I think looking in that box is worth it. I think locking is extremely high opportunity cost when the high rolls are so high, and I think the combination of low rolls is quite low, because it has to be the spell is bad and the units are bad, realistically. Like, because if the units are kind of bad, like a lot of the bad units are better when there's a good spell. Like Wizard's Familiar is bad unless there's a Genie's Wish, and Happy Little Tree is kind of bad unless it's with a Mim or a Sugar and Spice or whatever, right? Like, or you eeny meeny into it. Like, there's tons of, it's quite hard for both the units to be bad and the spell be bad, whereas the high roll only needs some synergy. And I think 90% of the time you get the medium roll anyway. Like, most of the spells give +1/+1, and it's just the same most of the time.
That's fair. We have ignored the fact that you can not lock the medium roll and still get the medium roll.
Yeah, and I think that's the default scenario, because most again, it's part of the reason the +1/+1. It's part of the reason it's part of the reason Shadow the Ice Queen is so good, is that the power level of tier 2 units is extremely flat. Almost all of them are the same, and any stat increase pushes you quite a long way over the edge.
Yes, the numbers are so small that any adjustment can be huge.
And so again, that fundamentally means there aren't that many situations where you're way behind in stats, but it's still possible to get those high rolls. And I do think those economic high rolls in particular, as well as, again, like Sure Shot Frog Prince is not only I win this fight and the next fight, it's I'm in a really good place going forward. It is extremely good.
But it's not. Neither of those cards are dwarves. Neither of them are evil. And you might not win the fights. Like, I get that it's good. I'm not taking my Sure Shot Frog Princes. But that's not giving me direction on tier 3 or into tier 4. That's just fine. Some stats that I've got sitting around. That tricked me into thinking taking this Good Witch of the North was a good idea.
Oh, fine. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm okay with the good early game. Like, I'm fine taking Good Witches and Stags on 3.0, even though good is in a bit of a weird place in the mid game at the moment. Like, I'm not so on rails that I'm desperate to pick up Crafties over Sure Shots. Like, that's not where I'm at.
That's true. I mean, I'm not there either. That would be... But I will take the Sure Shot, lock the Crafty, plus the Sugar and Spice.
Yeah, no way I'd do that.
Given that we failed to come to a consensus, I vote we throw this open. Listeners, get in touch with us on the Discord or on Twitter. Leave us a comment on the YouTube. I want to hear the reasoning. I don't want to hear, I always lock for the Witch's Brew there. I want to know... what for you is the tiebreaker? What for you changes? What for you brings you down on one side of this argument between Matt and I?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to 1,000 caveats. I can definitely point to shops where I've locked Sugar and Spice. Definitely happens. Yeah. I can point on way fewer shops where I've locked Witch's Brew, to be clear. But
because you've never taken the Kitty Cutpurse, because you're a coward. That's our show. Thank you so much for listening. We are available anywhere podcasts are sold. iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and now YouTube. 7th tier podcast in all locations. Don't forget there's still time to enter our giveaway. #sponsored. Head on over to our YouTube channel, subscribe to the channel, and put a comment on last week's show, episode 16, Monday, Dwarf Slay, Happy Days, to be in with a chance to win 4,000 dust, enough for one hero. You can find us on the Discord. I'm Jethro, he's Sythesys. You can follow us on Twitter at 7th tier podcast, the number 7, the word podcast. We'll be back next week with the same content, but we'll be saying different words. Until then, don't forget, Witch's Brew on a Kitty Cutpurse is putting bad on bad. Have a great week.